Welcome back to another episode of Lost in the Farmer's Market Garden Shorts, where today we're looking at this plant here in front of you. This plant, its scientific name is Artemisia vulgaris, and it is in the aster family. Its common name, the one you'll most likely see it in books and references, is Mugwort. Now, its name derives from one of two places, depending on how you want to look at it. Either it derived from the Greek goddess Artemis herself as an honorific to her, or it derived from Artemisia II of Caria, who is a botanist and a captain, a sea captain, who then was named after Artemis. Now, it's up to you which one you want to do. The most references cite one or the other, or cite both. So it's hard to say how the name came about. But, I mean, Artemisia is a nice name anyway. And, consequently, the cousin of this plant is the plant that makes absinthe, also known as wormwood. You know of it, you've heard of it, I'm sure. You've also heard of its culinary cousin, Dracunculus. That's what she said. That would be tarragon, which is actually in the Artemisia family. Who knew? Anyway, so let me just cover some of the other nicknames for this plant before I go into anything else, because it's got a lot of nicknames. It's got a lot of also known ases. So, riverside wormwood, felon herb, chrysanthemum weed, which I can see based on the leaf shape, it does kind of look like a chrysanthemum, wild wormwood, old Uncle Henry. Not sure where that came from. Sailor's tobacco. Well, maybe they smoked a bit and came up with Old Uncle Henry to cover it from the captain. Naughty man. Seriously, that one's popped up in a bunch of references. I don't know why it's called that. This plant doesn't help get your yin up, so to speak, if you get my drift. Anyway, it's also known as St. John's plant, not to be confused with St. John's wort, which is Hypericum. Totally different plants, totally different families. Now, in China, it is known as luhao, Luhao. I'm not sure I pronounced that right, so y'all can correct me if I'm wrong in the comment section. And in Nepal, it's, and I'm sorry for butchering this, titty patty? Titepati. Again, if y'all know the proper pronunciation, I'd love to see it. But let's move on to the core deets, shall we? Now, Artemisia vulgaris, or mugwort, was originally native to temperate Europe, Asia, and North Africa, as well as Alaska. I'm supposing it came across on the land bridge either by its own volition or by the carrying actions of folks crossing it, possibly by seed, possibly by rhizome. Who knows? But now it's naturalized all over North America. So, yeah, it's effectively become a native plant because it's been here so darn long. It's hardy in USDA zones 3 through 9 as a perennial. However, in the colder climates, this plant will die completely to the ground and resprout in spring, which is kind of neat. It's like that whole rebirth thing. But anyway, it can take a soil pH of 6 to 7.0, and it can tolerate some of the most horrible soils you did ever seen. Its exposure is full sun, but it'll tolerate partial shade, and its height can be 3 to 6 feet tall, with a possibility of it reaching 7 feet tall. And I'm assuming that would be in exceptionally good soil with care. That's some scary mugwort. That's some mugwort that might mug you. But anyway, its width is probably about half of that, so 1.5 to 3 feet, thereabouts. The rhizomatous spread of this plant makes it hard to tell which plant is which, but in here there are 2 rhizomes, and then you can see the offshoots. Yep, that's what the mugwort do. Anyway, mugwort, as I mentioned, spreads by seed, which is less effective, but mainly by its creeping rhizomes, which makes it self-propagating. This plant here is a batch of a couple that I rescued from a construction site. They had turned over the soil, and the soil was sandy and rife with iron oxide, so it was red sand. And these things were just growing out of it like it was a bonanza, which means that the rhizomes were already there, or the seed was already there. They had turned over the soil months earlier, so there's no telling how long this had been there. Maybe it had been hiding in the lawn that was there prior. It's hard to tell. But because of its insistence on continuing to exist, Mugwort is considered an invasive because of its ability to survive and its rhizome's ability to spread and adapt. It'll form dense thickets that can be as wide as they can spread, but it can be controlled with a lawnmower if you really need to do that. Additionally, any herbicide will make this plant drop and give you 20. Now, I do know that it does have some medicinal use. However, I always recommend consulting a certified practitioner of medicine or herbal medicine before you take this orally. But supposedly, taken orally, it can handle digestive issues and high blood pressure. Not bad. Additionally, I do know that you can eat it as an aromatic herb, and it's used typically in soups, stews, and or stuffing. So there's that as well. Again, not bad. Now, beyond that, I want to tell you a little story about how I first encountered mugwort. Now, down here in the south, as I said, this was found in a site with iron oxide rife sandy soil, which is normal for the sandhills, the sand at least, growing in full blazing hot southeastern laser sun. But the first time I encountered it was in New Jersey in a little town called Montclair. And in that little town, I want to say 6 doors up from the apartment building I lived in when I was in my early teens and as a kid, there, behind, of all places, the Planned Parenthood Clinic, which was actually on our block, in the portion of the back of their lot, at the end of their parking lot in the back, there was a slope going down, and then there was a retaining wall in another apartment complex. It was fenced off at the top of the wall. But this was growing on the entire hillside. And boy, was it something. But what made it interesting was the scent. I mean, I knew that you could use it as an herb, as I knew you could use it as an incense. But what I found out was that it is one of the preferred nesting sites for praying mantids because of the dense foliage cover it gives. They prefer to lay their egg cases in it. So this plant has uses beyond being an herbal, a medicinal, a culinary. It is a daisy. It's going to attract pollinators. It's almost guaranteed, even though this plant is effectively wind pollinated. It's also going to attract certain species of moth and or butterfly so their larvae can eat it. But it's also going to help attract, guess what? Praying mantids. It's going to provide cover, and it's one of those plants where you literally can plant it in sandy soil and leave it alone, since it tolerates a wide range of crappy soils as long as they're not constantly wet. So it is supremely adaptable. Now, as you can see, the rhizome action is coming out of the side of the pot here. There are little babies sprouting up from the primary. There are 2 rhizomes in here. And you can see the primary rhizomes are these big stalks here. So this plant is healthy and vigorous. Now, when you grow this plant in your garden, I'm going to put this proviso out there. If you're in the southeast, I would recommend growing it in a very large pot. And I would recommend taking precautions to make sure that it cannot escape through the drainage hole. Because this plant will, as you see here, go down and out. And if it thinks it could, it would have grown out of the bottom of this pot, I assure you. We're not going to let that happen. Now, this plant is semi-invasive, but you can wisely contain it. It's not like it's mint or anything. But this is a plant you should consider for your garden as an unusual piece of the cottage garden cheat. And that's all I have for you right now. So, if you like this episode, please hit like. If you haven't already, please subscribe. It helps the channel. And consequently, if you want to help with those pronunciations, I'd appreciate it. So, in the video description down at the bottom, you will find a link to our blog with forage foods, where I'm moving on to, I believe we're moving on to white clover at this point, as of this filming. So, with that said, as always, folks, keep them growing. Thank you for watching.